The King's speech comes as large crowds continue to gather and pay their respects. A sea of flowers pave the ground in honour of Her Majesty. Royal Editor Rob Jobson is in London for us. Rob, observing from a distance, it just seems that their initial shock is now really morphing into quite a deep grief as people try to comprehend a world without the Queen, something that people haven't even been able to get their head around, really. What are you observing? What are you observing there in London?
Well, I was down there all day, actually, Matt, and yeah, I think there's a sense of grief and sorrow. Of course there is. And I think there are lots of lovely, wonderful floral tributes and people walking with their children to go and pay their respects by laying flowers outside the Buckingham Palace. But actually, I think things are moving on at quite a pace. That's what's, it wasn't that long ago that we were announcing with shock the Queen had died, and I think that was, left anyone sort of aghast. And then things have moved on. You've now got a new king, we've got a new Queen Consort, and we've got a new Prince and Princess of Wales. And so that is how constitutional monarchy works, and that's how the system works. So I think, yes, there is. But as the Prince of Wales referenced in his speech, which I thought was quite a emotional but brilliant speech, actually, he was talking about a life well lived. And I think when you're dealing with somebody who's 96, whose first Prime Minister was Churchill, who knew Robert Menzies, who, had travelled the world, time and time, again with her husband, and he's probably one of the most experienced politicians and diplomats around. I think you can only feel happiness at a life, a joy at a life. And yes, there is sadness, and there will be immense sadness, I think, when the funeral takes place in 10 days or so. But I think at the moment people are reflecting upon what it means to them and and their lives. I know that people like my mother, who was born in 1939, has a real sense of grief about losing the Queen, because she's grown up with the Queen. I mean, I've only ever known the Queen. I've only ever known her as our monarch. But now we're moving into a different time, and I think we're all reflecting upon how that impacts upon us and what's next. But I don't feel a sense of a lack of continuity or a lack of a real edginess. I think that sense of transition to Charles has worked. There's not a sense of uncertainty. I think those pictures today of him being kissed and the people singing God Save the King are quite reassuring, actually.
In many ways, due to the way that Queen Elizabeth was able to deputise now King Charles, as you reflect on there, I just want to ask you, Jobbo, I mean, when you look at the legacy of Queen Elizabeth, the idea of the role of celebrity in this day and age, that somebody could be so universally loved as we are seeing reflected by the depth of the character of the tributes that we are seeing for Queen Elizabeth now, it is no small thing, is it?
Well, it really isn't. I mean, I was listening with great interest to yesterday to some of the remarks, not only those, I think, very eloquent remarks by Prime Minister Albanese, but also from Scott Morrison and Peter Cosgrove, the former Governor-General. All of these people spoke, these are big people, these are big names, and they would spoke of their great respect for this lady. I mean, she was a walking history. The things that she'd seen and known and kept to herself. And I think that what is important was what actually Theresa May, the former UK Prime Minister, said, is that it was the one meeting where people of this sort of level who've got to deal with all sorts of issues and all sorts of intrigues, political backbiting and all the things that go on, but it was the one person they could confide in and know it was going nowhere else. This was not going to be on, the subject on the next day's papers, because it was not going to be briefed out to somebody else. So she was somebody who people had total trust in. I mean, when I met her, I used to always worry, because what have I written in the newspapers today? What have I done something wrong? And if you had, Prince Philip would be the first to tell you. But when we used to line up to meet her for a sort of reception when we're on one of these royal overseas tours, she used to sort of shake your hand, have a beaming smile as you read out your name, beaming smile, and she put you totally at your ease. She was a absolutely lovely lady, and I think that's probably first and foremost the way we should remember her. Somebody who was a great public servant, but somebody who was very humble, and I think it's that sense of duty and work ethic. She was working right up to the end. She did fulfil her promise to God and to her late father. She put in a hell of a stint, and we should always be grateful for that.
A promise of destiny kept, in the words of King Charles, which is a really beautiful way of putting it.